let's talk about what's going on tomorrow. Tomorrow is a big day. Tomorrow, James Comey is going to be testifying before the Senate. Today, he released his opening statement to the public, including copies of his memos, the memos that were previously leaked. And he shared all of this information today. I don't know if it was to soften the blow of what's going to happen tomorrow, but the memos and all the information that James Comey released today actually confirms that the leaks that we got prior to this were accurate, were 100% accurate in terms of the memos. If we could take just a snapshot of what he's going to say tomorrow, he describes President Trump as someone who is eager to, quote, create some sort of patronage relationship over him. In other words, Trump wanted to rearrange the nature of their relationship such that even though he was not the FBI director that he appointed, he was not appointed by Trump, he would be beholden to Trump. And Donald Trump continued to try to get that type of relationship with James Comey. And we'll go statement by statement. There's actually 4 memos. And there's 2 memos, actually it's a 6 or 4, but there's 2 memos in particular that point out this demand for loyalty. And the second memo that we'll go over actually shows how close Donald Trump came to obstruction of justice. And it really just comes down to a legal question of whether or not it is a true obstruction of justice. So we're going to start with a January memo in which he was having dinner with President Trump, and we'll bring him up on your screen now. January 27th, he had a dinner for 2, and this is the memo that James Comey recorded afterwards. He said, "The president began by asking me whether I wanted to stay on as the FBI director, which I found strange because he had already told me twice in earlier conversations that he hoped I would stay, and I had assured him that I had intended to. He said that lots of people wanted my job, and given the abuse that I had taken during the previous year, he would understand if I wanted to walk away. My instincts told me that the one-on-one setting and the pretense that this was an effort to have me ask for my job and create some sort of patronage relationship. That concerned me greatly given the FBI's traditionally independent status in the executive branch." He went on to say, a few moments later, the president said, "I need loyalty. I expect loyalty." And this is where James Comey actually demonstrates his magnificent writing skills. He said, "I didn't move, speak, or change my facial expression in any way during the awkward silence that followed. We simply looked at each other in silence. I explained why it was so important that the FBI and the Department of Justice be independent of the White House. And finally, he said, near the end of our dinner, the president returned to the subject of my job, saying he was very glad that I wanted to stay. He then said, I need loyalty. I replied, James Comey replied, you will always get honesty from me. He paused and then said, that's what I want, honest loyalty. I paused and then said, you would get that from me. All right, so at the end of that memo, James Comey actually described that he's quite certain that Donald Trump interpreted the phrase honest loyalty completely different than he interpreted. They imbued two different meanings in that word. But he decided this was the best way to end an already awkward conversation. But this demonstrates that Donald Trump was looking for a loyalty oath. He was looking for an FBI director who was not going to be independent, but have an FBI director who was going to be beholden and acquiesce to the demands of the President of the United States. Not only the demands, but in some cases, the whims of the President of the United States. And James Comey clearly made the case that he felt that this was inappropriate. He felt like this was something that he could not commit to, but in order to end an awkward conversation, he went ahead and said that I'll give you that. That was conversation number one. That should set the framework of our thinking of this next, on our thinking for this next conversation that occurred in February. In February, in the Oval Office, he had a conversation with James Comey, and this is a portion of the memo that Comey recorded. He stated, the president signaled at the end of the briefing by thanking, or the president signaled the end of the briefing by thanking the group and telling them all that he wanted to speak to me alone. I stayed in my chair. As participants started to leave the Oval Office, the Attorney General lingered by my chair, but the president thanked him and said he wanted to speak only with me. When the door by the grandfather clock closed and we were alone, the president began by saying, I want to talk about Mike Flynn. The president began by saying Mike Flynn had done nothing wrong in speaking with the Russians, but he had let him go. He had to let him go because he misled the vice president. He is a good guy and has been through a lot. Trump then said, I hope you can see your way clear to letting this go, to letting Flynn go. He is a good guy. I hope you can let this go. And this is Comey speaking. He said, I replied only that he is a good guy. I did not say I would let it go. I don't know what's next for James Comey, but he should actually start writing because he's, you know, that actually, those memos, these are his memos, right? They're actually compelling narratives. But more importantly than his writing prowess is the fact that this is the memo where it becomes a legal question. Was there actually obstruction of justice? We talk about a lot of times, it's not really the conspiracy itself that gets people. It's the cover up of an alleged conspiracy. Because right now, as it stands, we have not seen any concrete evidence. We just see smoke. And generally, where there's smoke, there seems to be fire. But we have not seen any concrete evidence that is actionable enough for the Democrats to pursue impeachment. Believe me, if there was solid enough evidence already, the Democratic Party would already have drawn up and signed articles of impeachment to the extent that they can in the minority. However, they're not there. And so this is a perfect example of Donald Trump possibly treading into the realm of doing something illegal to cover up an alleged conspiracy. And not, you know, even in the broader sense, this is specifically talking about Michael Flynn, but Michael Flynn is directly connected to the ongoing relationships that seem to be improper, the ongoing improper relationships that the Trump administration had with Russians, with the Russian ambassador, and conversations that were out of turn, out of order, not done in the proper manner. And it's indicative of the type of environment that was fostered in the Trump administration, yet and still, it may not be any conversation that he had with the Russians, Michael Flynn or Jared Kushner or anyone in the administration. It could very well end up turning on the fact that Donald Trump attempted to use his authority as the president of the United States to influence the FBI director to no longer investigate Michael Flynn. Whether or not this is an actual case of obstruction of justice, that's a legal question. But the fact of the matter is, the leaks that were leaked several weeks ago confirm exactly what James Comey is going to testify to on tomorrow. Now, Comey understood the nature of what happened. He's going to go on to testify tomorrow that after he left, he jotted down this memo. And after recording this memo, he talked to the senior leadership at the FBI. And they decided two things. Number one, they were not going to influence or contaminate the people doing the investigation with any information that they just received from the president. In other words, the president wanted them to let it go. He was not going to pass this down to the people who were actually doing the investigation. That's number one. Number two, they realized the nature of the request from Donald Trump, but because it was essentially his word against Donald Trump's, there was no way to corroborate his memo. It was simply a memo. He understood that there was nothing he could actually do about it, and so he was not going to take this to the Attorney General to file a complaint. However, he recognized the nature of it was such that if there was some way to corroborate it, it would be something that he would file with the Attorney General, and obviously stating the obvious that that Jeff Sessions himself was going to have to recuse himself in this case. Like this is where we are, right? We're not talking about we're talking about the FBI director clearly seeing that the request being made by the President of the United States bordered something that if he was able to corroborate above and beyond his memo, it warranted filing a complaint with the Attorney General. Again, it's never the conspiracy, it's never the controversy, it's the cover-up of the controversy that generally gets people caught up. And it seems to be the case with Donald Trump. Last but not least in this memo was the fact that he was so uncomfortable with President Trump that he asked the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, to please make sure that he never has to be alone with the president again. This is actually documented in his statements. He was so uncomfortable with how Donald Trump made him feel. And I think more precisely, he was more uncomfortable with the things that Donald Trump was asking him to do. And where this is really great political fodder for us to laugh about Donald Trump having some type of personality that makes people uncomfortable and nobody wants to be around him privately. The reality of it is that this very well could be James Comey trying to protect the President of the United States, to make sure that he's not alone with him to make any other request that borderlines obstruction of justice.